There's talk of basically taxing the internet and taxing hate speech. So I'm looking forward to talking with Dan Gainor about this topic because I think this is a big item. I think this is one that really resonates with those who are thinking forward. But I think a lot of people are, they're just saying, oh, well, this is justified. This is good, whatever. I say whatever, they're passing it off. They're just shifting it aside. I think it's a big issue, and I'm looking forward to talking to Dan Gainor about that a little later on in the program here on Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107 AM 1240, Lockwood behind the mic. And we've got Taylor behind the wall, window, and board today. The numbers, if you'd like to join us, 252 area code 247-7282. That's 252 area code 247-7282. Via email at viewpoints with an S, viewpointsradio@hotmail.com. Via Facebook at Viewpoints on the talk station. And, of course, I do want to take the moment to thank our sponsors for the afternoon. Of course, Advanced Water Systems, the people that bring you Connecticut, folks that are practically reinventing water, and Floyd's 1921 restaurant. We are 1 week from Good Friday and 1 week and 2 days from Easter Sunday. Special day for Christian America. But it's also a very, very special day for us here in the surrounding areas of Carteret, Craven, and Onslow counties, and Pamlico and Pender and what have you, in light of the fact that you're not very far from Floyd's 1921 restaurant. And so I bring this to your attention because Floyd's is open. They opened earlier this week, now just for dinner, Tuesday through Sunday, starting at 5 p.m., but they are open on Sundays for Sunday brunch. And most importantly, they are going to be open for their famous Easter buffet, Floyd's Easter buffet. Garden salad, grandma's deviled eggs. We're talking about garlic green beans, baked sweet potatoes, old-fashioned baked macaroni and cheese, shrimp and grits with tasso ham gravy, poached salmon with tarragon cream sauce, southern fried chicken, and a carving station with honey-baked ham and carved leg of lamb and carved roast beef, as well as apple cheddar muffins. And I always advise you, be very cautious about those apple cheddar muffins. They're delicious. Cornbread and lightning rolls. But the apple cheddar muffins, ladies and gentlemen, nibble on one, pocket the rest. Enjoy a great meal at Floyd's 1921 restaurant and a great Easter buffet. Now, as I tell you this, just to remind you, mandatory, you have to know the phone number. That's the code to get in. Well, part of the code to get in to Floyd's 1921 restaurant. It's the first part. You've got to dial it, 727-1921, and get your reservation. Because without that phone number, without that reservation, it's a beautiful restaurant to look at from the outside, and you can enjoy the smell. And that's about it. If you want to enjoy a great meal at Floyd's 1921 restaurant, just to remind you, reservations are mandatory. And the Easter buffet is on tap. I will tell you, that buffet fills fast. I know from prior experience. And I actually did help squeeze somebody in. I can't do it anymore. Chef Floyd will not appreciate it. 727-1921, that's Floyd's 1921, famous Easter buffet, a week from this Sunday. And by the way, the cost, fabulous. $26.95 per person, plus gratuity. And then $13 for children 12 and under. And by the way, 5 and under, free. That's Floyd's 1921 restaurant. That number, by the way, 727-1921. I know that we've got Dan Gainor joining us here in just a moment, and I want to get to this topic. And, of course, it also applies to the issue of Julian Assange. But the big issue is we're seeing a lot of focus, and we're even seeing legislation that would tax hate speech. Dan, good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. And I'm beginning to get a little nervous about all this effort of controlling the content of any enterprise, let alone the internet. But maybe I'm wrong. And good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you. We have a weird connection. I think a button must be hit wrong or something like that.
I see that. I've got it fixed right there. Thank you very much.
There we go.
Yep.
Much better. So, I see today Austria is talking about making it mandatory that you must register online, eliminating all anonymity on the internet so that if they don't like the words you say, they can arrest you.
Yeah.
We've watched in recent time New Zealand, Singapore, Australia, Russia, and the UK. Three of those are generally thought to be free countries, and Austria is generally thought to be a free country. And the free countries are leading the pack for radical restrictions on speech online. This is what Americans are facing, because the most radical, crazy people out there sometimes are the do-gooder liberals who want to take away your free speech.
I know this is something, and we were chatting with some folks. As a matter of fact, I was chatting with someone from the Daily Caller a couple of days ago about this very issue, in which the question was asked of these major companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, how do they perceive themselves? And he pointed out that they perceive themselves in some instances as international companies. So they were developed in a country like America, where freedom of speech and freedom of enterprise and movement was key to their very development. And now they themselves are participating in China and in other countries in developing ways to control the very product that they intended to produce to begin with, which is a free market. I'm worried, Dan, that what we're seeing now is these other countries beginning to influence, external influence into internal operations of this country.
Well, massively. Fortress America went away with the creation of the internet.
Right.
And that's been one of the biggest problems we've encountered, because no longer are we just influenced by our trading partners, our allies, and our neighbors. And certainly Mexico and Canada always have influence in America, but now literally any country can. Russia can, invade into our elections, at least, in some influential way.
Right.
Russia has a quasi-news organization, multiple ones really. RT, and then Ruppli, which does video. Al Jazeera is run by Qatar. It's also a propaganda organization. The BBC, also a propaganda organization. I know there's some people might disagree with me on that. They'd be wrong. I'd be right. And you could go down the line. China, pretty much any foreign news source, a lot of them are state-funded. A lot of the ones that aren't state-funded are still left-wing abroad, trying to shift America to the left. And so this is happening. The so-called free nations are racing to stem the tide of nationalism and the rise of the right around the world. And so what's happened is the very people. See, this is one of those things. It's where names and terms stop meaning anything.
Right.
The very people who run around and tell you, "Oh my God, those right-wingers are fascists. They want to take away all their rights." And they will say, it's not just the United States, it's around the world.
Right.
They'll point to people in Brazil, like Bolsonaro, or Netanyahu, or in Israel, or Orban in Hungary, and they'll go down the line and they'll say, "Oh, all these people, this rising right-wing thing." They'll talk about Brexit and say it's all horrible. And so their solution to stopping it is what?
Control.
Taking away the rights from everybody.
Right, control.
And I mean from everybody. You read, there's a guy, I can't think of his name right now, but I was reading his Twitter feed the other day, and he's sort of New Zealand's official censor. And as in censor, yeah, that's what he wants to do. He wants to restrict the internet. You've got people abroad saying, "Oh, you shouldn't have this access." He openly says, if Facebook can't monitor all the video, the live video, you just shouldn't have it. Who is he? Who is this disgusting, psychopathic, demented, dangerous weasel abroad thinking he can tell people what free speech they can have? He's a tyrant.
And we're going to take a quick break on this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a pardon me, and by the way, we're going to get into this with Dan Gainor at newsbusters.org, by the way, newsbusters.org. We've even got an article I'm looking at. Free Speech Alliance demanding answers from Google. This, Dan, is something that I fear the vast majority of the audience, our current audience and audience at large, are going to be sort of, ho-hum, a yawn, this is not that important. And by the time we discover it's important, it'll be too late. We'll get back to this in just a moment with Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org. Then we'll get into some of the media issues of the past week. But I really wanted to start off with this story because I think this is something that all of you, as you're listening to this program this evening, by the way, you're welcome to join us, 252 area code 247-7282, 247-7282. If you're controlling the message, you're controlling the country. Stay with us here on Viewpoints. All right, we normally do not, we go into the issue of the events, the weekend coverage of the past week as we prepare for the weekend. But I started off with a big issue, one that, I'm going to ask Dan about this, and it's related to the control of the messaging in this country and around the world. And Dan, I think it's a big deal. Am I right?
Yeah, you are. So here, it doesn't matter how much time you spend online or not right now. This is addressed to absolutely everybody. Right. It doesn't matter whether you ever go on the internet. It doesn't matter whether you know what Twitter and Facebook are, or if you think there's some little goofy things your kids or your grandkids play with. It doesn't matter any of that. Just think back. Think back to when you read 1984.
Right.
Think back to when you read Animal Farm or Brave New World or any of these things that were supposed to be warnings about big government.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine all the warnings coming true, but it's not necessarily coming true the same way you thought it was. Where the most powerful organizations to restrict your speech in the world are no longer just governments, they are companies.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk all the time about First Amendment. We have the right to say this. You can walk out on the street corner in America, not in Britain anymore, but in America, and say pretty much anything you want. You might get in trouble in certain parts. If you read the Bible publicly in Dearborn, Michigan, you'll get in trouble because the influence of Islam in that local politics there. But by and large, you can get away with saying most things in America now. But you go online, you can't say any of them. I mean, any of them. And so increasingly, online is where we do everything. Where you do business, even small business people. I know you have websites where organizations fundraise, where your church fundraises. Your church's got a website. So if you believe in traditional values, if you believe in free speech, if you believe in any of these things, all of it's going to be taken away from you. Your church might not be able to say that it believes in traditional marriage on its own website.
Right.
Because they can say, well, that's fine. You can say that. You're not listed in Google.
Uh-huh.
Your church's Facebook page goes away. That's actually a lot sooner than Google. But yes, you can, any of the things that you believe, they can take away because you don't have the same rights online. You don't have First Amendment rights online. These are private companies. They can say and do as they want. But here's the interesting part, and one of the things we're going to get into, and I mean increasingly, is if these companies work at the behest of foreign governments, are they violating your First Amendment speech?
No, because they're working for foreign governments. They're not working for the United States.
Right, but if they're working at the behest of government, they're now are they violating American law and the American Constitution? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing that I would argue. I now see myself, Dan, as an international company, or better yet, as one of my guests has said, I view myself as my very own country. I'm a virtual country. And so...
Well, but you have to see yourself as an international company. Every company in America that has potentially foreign customers that are in the EU...
Yep.
And the EU is a lot bigger than people think it is as far as geography. If you have one customer, you are forced to legally obey this European privacy law, the GDPR.
Right.
So increasingly, what the other countries say happens. When New Zealand demanded that Facebook take down the video and the manifesto from that terrorist who attacked Muslims in New Zealand, they got taken down everywhere. So what happens when the Muslim countries demand that criticism of Islam be considered hate speech and be taken down on all the social media platforms? Do they do it?
Look, here's okay. Dan and I we're reaching for this issue today. This is not real. This is not going to happen. Now, let me share with you, Dan. You've seen the story from Reuters. U.S. Senator Mark Warner. U.S. Senator Mark Warner, who co-sponsored legislation this week to ban deceptive practices by social media companies, said on Thursday he was eyeing additional bills aimed at limiting hate speech and allowing users to remove their data their data across platforms. All right.
Yeah.
Hate
bans
speech.
on hate speech are what's called bans on free speech if you do it off platform. The left has tried very hard to criminalize free speech in this country so that they can say you can't say certain things.
Right.
The big case. There was an incident yesterday. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but a conservative was speaking at a college, and issues. And one of the things that happened, not only did he get college students protesting because you're not allowed to talk about gender issues, but then one of the people, somebody came in with a super circular with some sort of chemical compound in the super circular and sprayed him. Attacked him because he dared to mention that women are not men. Because women are not men. I'll say this. Anybody who's transgender, and I'm sorry for your mental issues, but
biologically, it's a fact.
I'm just sorry. You can't. I can't wake up tomorrow and say that I'm 18 years old. I can't wake up tomorrow and tell people I'm a Klingon. I can do these things. They are delusional. That doesn't mean that I'm sure someone you should hate. It doesn't mean that someone you should pity. It just basically means that I would have a mental health concern. But what we've done in our society now is we say that, oh no, you don't. We need to empower you to be, incredibly dangerously obese. Oh, no, that's empowering. We need to empower you to say that you're a gender you're not. We need to empower you to say that your kids are a gender they're not. I mean, it's all madness. And but when you say it offline, you can't force me to embrace it yet. But when you say it online, you can. Or I can be silent. So a left-wing Canadian professor, so an academic, one of the people we want to debate issues in theory, a left-wing Canadian professor was banned from Twitter because she dared to say men are not women. And so there's a group, there's this, the weird intersection of allies is there is a group called trans exclusionary radical feminists. In other words, they are radical feminists who think that people who transition from male to female are not in fact females. They have not shared this. They have not grown up female. They have not shared the same life experience, the same discrimination or issues, and so they don't think that they should be counted in radical feminism. Well, that is these days, what 5 years ago would have been seen like duh, is now seen as insane or aggressive or something that gets them banned. So TERFs, as they are called, end up getting banned online. So you're not. So the left so controls the rules now that you can't disagree with them. If you disagree with them, you're a hater and you're banned. If you say anything, I mean, everybody spends time online. If you spend a fair amount of time discussing controversial topics, you end up self-editing and self-censoring. There are days I want to say this. Oh, I'm getting ready to go out. Do I really want to have like 4,000 responses to something I tweet? And I'm not going to stay there and fight. It's insane. And the inmates rule the asylum, and now what is happening globally is we've got a new overlay where governments want to control everything, and trust me, American politicians, they want to get right into this.
Right.
How dare you conservatives say anything? Because you notice Facebook and now others came out and said, we're going to restrict white nationalism online.
Uh-huh.
Now, they didn't say they're going to restrict blank nationalism, which would have been racial nationalism. If they had said that, well, that would have been controversial. Are we restricting Israeli nationalism? Jewish nationalism? Is that suddenly a controversial thing? Certainly Arabs, Palestinians, Muslims, any of those groups might say that Jewish nationalism is bad. But that's not restricted yet. I say yet. Now, black African nationalism. You've got a constant problem now in South Africa of white farmers being attacked, robbed, raped, beaten, and killed.
Right.
And that's being promoted by one of the political parties in South Africa. The head of that political party, Julius Malema, is a black nationalist or black African nationalist, depending on what term you want to use. He's not banned. Louis Farrakhan, he thinks Jewish people are like termites. He's not banned, but white nationalism is, because you put the word white in front of things, and suddenly the left is eager to ban it.
This, Dan, we're going to go to a break. The frustration I have, and I mentioned this off air, the very organization that has promoted intellectual thought, well, that would be academia, forgive me on that one, but freedom of thought, freedom of speech, the very media that we rely on to provide us our information is, I would argue, behind this movement. Am I right?
Absolutely. CNN, particularly.
That is
CNN
scary.
is the reason why.
That is scary.
You don't have to like Alex Jones, but CNN's the reason why Alex Jones got deplatformed. CNN is all the time harassing the social media companies to remove conservatives or shut or limit content. I mean, they're the stalking horse for the new fascism.
Speaking of which, and by the way, another situation, look at now how government is beginning to control the very aspect of enterprise where they're now challenging, or if not challenging, actually punishing companies that do business with other companies that are considered, well, less than appropriate. Let's take, for example, the gun industry. We'll get to that in a few minutes because that's another topic. We are seeing now, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to go to the issue of entertainment a little later on the program, and I've got to give Dan some opportunity to share some of his observations from the past week. My apologies, Dan, to you, but this topic is so critical. But we're seeing now control of our very lives in a variety of ways. What banks we can use, how the banks are operating, who they will lend money to, and of course, then we go back to the issue of communications as well. We'll get to that and more in just a moment. Coming up, and right after this news break, we're going to have Dan Gainor and the good, bad, and the ugly for the week. I'm going to be interested in hearing what those three are. Stay with us here on Viewpoints with Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org. Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. Dan Gainor standing by to give us the good, the bad, and the ugly for the week. And Dan, if you're ready, I've got her locked and loaded. Those are trigger words. Pardon me. Okay, let's start with the good.
I am going to start with the intersection of sports and media. Former NFL star Reggie Bush did an interview this week, and shocking much of the world and being controversial, Reggie pointed out that he had been raised without a father, and that he thought that the family, the nuclear family unit, was in fact extremely important for raising children, and came out, quite strongly for the family. Something you seldom see in the news at all. And for an athlete to come out and do this, controversial. But kudos to him. So that indeed is the good for the week.
All right, I want to get back to that on another topic altogether. All right, that's the good. Now for the bad.
One of my coworkers did a tally of how much that Michael Avenatti had appeared on television for interviews in the last year.
Yeah.
It was 254 times. Now, this idiot loser lawyer, now he's being charged with 36 different criminal counts.
Yeah.
I'm not going to convict him in the least. But the only reason he even appeared on television once was because the media wanted to promote him against Donald Trump.
Right.
So this guy, him and his, unattractive former porn star client, Stormy Daniels. Mm-hmm. And yes, I know I am no great shakes, and I'm not going to be in a porn movie. But I'm just saying, him and Stormy, so they put him out there for that. CNN regularly gave him treatment like he was a legitimate presidential contender. Brian Stelter, who runs their Reliable Sources show, which is the most ironically named show on television, interviewed him and treated him like a legitimate 2020 presidential candidate.
Well, keep in mind,
he was how craven the press is. They put this guy on 254 times. He's now being charged with 36 criminal counts, and they act like they did nothing wrong.
This of course, we're talking about Stephanie Clifford, also known as Stormy Daniels, but Michael Avenatti. But remember, Dan, he announced he was going to run for president.
But there are 18 Democrats running for president.
I know.
Not all of them are getting the coverage that he got.
No. All right, that's the bad for the week. Actually, that's the funny for the week, in an odd sort of way. Let's go to the ugly for the week.
Back to Ilhan Omar.
Yeah.
Omar was giving a presentation, a speech somewhere, and was talking about the Council on American Islamic Relations.
Mm-hmm. Here.
Yes, which is a far-left, pro-Islamic pressure group that was an unindicted co-conspirator, and apparently there were a whole bunch of groups who were listed as unindicted co-conspirators in that trial.
Mm-hmm.
So CARE is not well thought of on the right. Nevertheless, she's out there defending CARE, and then she says she's falsely describing that CARE was founded after 9/11, which it was not. She says founded after 9/11 when some people did something.
Right. Some people did something on 9/11. Yeah.
Thoroughly minimizing what happened on 9/11, and that it was done by radical Muslims, and she happens to be certainly Islamic, and she seems her beliefs as they eke out around the edges of what she tries to not tell us. Her beliefs seem to be fairly significantly out of sync with the American public. So the fact that she was willing to say this, well, there was a reaction online. Congressman Dan Crenshaw criticized her. Some other people criticized her. The New York Post, in possibly one of the best New York Post covers ever, ran her quote, ran a photo of the Twin Towers on 9/11, and said, here's your some things right here, and kind of crammed it down her throat because, as they should, they were defending New Yorkers who had been attacked by terrorism, and it's so if that's where the story ended this wouldn't be the ugly this week.
Okay.
The thing is, that's not where the story ended. Where the story ended is with the press lining up behind Ilhan Omar to defend her. Mm-hmm. And, oh, this is racist. Oh, this is wrong. And the left and the media defending her. Oh, you can't criticize her. She's a person of color. Oh, wait, you're a racist if you criticize her because she's Muslim and a person of color. Like, no, you criticize. When you say stupid things, your race, your religion, and your gender do not make you immune from criticism. That's not how this works. Whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, a Hindu, or whatever, whether you're white, black, orange, yellow, or green, you still get criticized.
Right.
It doesn't insulate you from that. But that's what they want because the press and the left want to make it so everyone is afraid. I mean, not just to criticize her. Everyone is just afraid. You're afraid to speak up for your rights. You're afraid to defend the pro-life movie. You're afraid to say what you really think because you're going to be censored on the Internet. You don't want to lose access to that. And so they want to make us afraid all the time. So anytime somebody steps out of line to use the Japanese, and frankly, it's a great expression, the nail that sticks up is hammered down.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's what the left is trying to do to us. That's what the press is helping them do. And all the people listening right now who are like, oh, yeah, whatever. This is going to be you. And if it's not you, it's going to be your kids. They're going to have their rights taken away. They're not going to be able to speak. Already, your kids are encountering this in college. Or if they didn't encounter it in college, your grandkids will. Where they can't go to college and say that they support Donald Trump. They can't go to college and wear an American flag T-shirt or say they're patriotic or disagree with a professor in class. All of that garbage, all that safe space garbage is being taken online. Then governments are mixing it up and saying, we're going to make it law.
Right.
You can't, you support Donald Trump, you're a white nationalist. Guess what? If they think they can ban white nationalism. They've already said that white nationalists support Donald Trump and that Donald Trump espouses white nationalism. That means they can ban the President of the United States and his supporters. You think they're not trying to fix the 2020 election?
Well,
that's what they're trying to do.
The other aspect of this, I want to bring up another comment that Ilhan Omar made, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me on this one. She describes Stephen Miller as a white nationalist. And, of course, he works for the president. Stephen Miller is Jewish, and white nationalists are synonymous with Nazis. And so it was interesting that she was doing that comparison as well. This is Dan, to your point a few moments ago, looking up, if you go and you Google CARE, you'll see that it wasn't directly related to 9/11. And yet she was allowed to maintain that false description, that canard, that narrative. And the media didn't hold her accountable for that either.
Well, it's because they defend her. In fact, she didn't. Washington Post fact checker wrote about her and didn't give her any Pinocchios, even though she flat out her whole premise for her statement was wrong.
This is okay. I want to get back to the issue. I want to take a quick break. I want to get back to the issue of family and Reggie Bush.
You're going to give the number to call in before we do
I will. 252 area code 247-7282. 252 area code 247-7282. We want to hear your comment about what we've been talking about. Feel free. Phone lines are open. And I want to get back to the issue of family because what's interesting, Dan, is how the younger generation perceives family. And they think of it in forms of four legs. That's not two children either. Stay with us here on Viewpoints with Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org. Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org with us. Dan, before we get to the caller, very quickly, I watched saw an interesting article in which millennials now have sort of created their own families with dogs and dogs and cats with pets. And as I'm looking at this story you gave us from Reggie Bush and the concept of a nuclear family, traditional family, that's going to change radically. I wonder what will be the comment 20 years from now. I just throw that out.
Well, what we've done, we've allowed the press and the entertainment media to teach people to not have children.
Right.
Because the whole idea, I mean, they don't want to admit it, but the idea of women being empowered in the workplace, something's got to suffer.
You got it.
And so it's family. So you don't have kids. It's so, I mean, look, I don't have kids, so not exactly how I want things to work out, but it's how things worked out. But I know a fair number of childless, professional women.
Right.
And a lot of them are not happy about it because they were told for years that you can have it all.
That's exactly.
Well, you know what? You can't.
No.
Everything. We always make sacrifices in life. We're always, you get this instead of that. We always make choices. Well, if you choose to not devote any time to family, don't be surprised when you don't have any family.
Right. No, I had to bring that up. We won't have time to talk about the academic scandal and the impact that's going to have on Hollywood. We'll do that next week, probably. We've got a caller standing by. Let me get to Gary in Oriental. Gary, good afternoon to you. Yes, sir.
Hey, Dan. I'm really perplexed about something. We've got this show out there called I Love Lunacy, starring Dizzy Cortez, and you've got Omar and all these freshmen out here. How is it that a freshman I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, with absolutely zero experience in Congress, can suddenly get on foreign relations committees and things of this nature, these very, very important committees. And like Omar, and I'm going to use her as an example because, quite frankly, I'm from Minnesota. I personally grew up with Amy Klobuchar, and they're all mental cases, trust me. and I'm looking at this and going, when and how and why will they not reel in these people? And like Omar, for instance, with all her anti-Semitism, which is very, very blatant, what does it take to get these people thrown out of Congress and get them off these committees?
All right, let's find out.
What is going on here?
I think sooner or later, I think it's pretty obvious Omar will go too far because, this is who she is. So all she's doing is telling. So we keep pushing the bar lower and lower for her to get over. But sooner or later, she's going to say something, and that's going to be it. And I think the Democrats know she's going to crash and burn, but I think they're stuck waiting on it. Because what's happened, although Steny Hoyer was speaking at AIPAC recently and stressed that there were not three freshman Democrats, there are 62, it's the three that are getting all the attention. You can thank the press for that, and you can thank social media for that. Ocasio-Cortez is excellent at managing the social media presence. She has charisma. She is pretty, and she says crazy things. So that's helped. Omar the same way. She's extremely radical. But remember, we're at a point now where there are, I think it's estimated to be roughly 3 million Muslims in America. It's a rapidly growing population in this country, and it's this is what happens when you represent a rising and certainly non-traditional belief population. And I don't mean religion at all in that. I mean they don't like Israel. They don't seem to like America. In fact, you look at one of the videos where she compares Hamas and Hezbollah to the U.S. and our army. And she said, she doesn't understand. She had this college professor who would straighten his back and say the words Hamas and Hezbollah like they were powerful words. And she's laughing about this. And you say, nobody does that when they say United States or Army. She really thinks they're just the same. She thinks Hamas and Hezbollah are just governing groups. They're just okay. They're both terror organizations, but not in her mind. And so when I say she's out of the mainstream, she is, but she's not out of the mainstream of the young, radical, activist part of the Democratic Party.
Gary?
And so the question...
Well, Dan, I made an observation,
Gary,
and I want to throw this one at you.
Very quickly. We're wrapping it up.
Okay. Minnesota and Jews in general, we have a huge Jewish population. The only good thing that came out of Omar is that she has swayed with her rhetoric and Hollywood's rhetoric. They have really turned the Jewish population of this country towards the right, and that's the only good thing I can say. What do you think about that?
Right. Gary, thanks very much. I'm sorry, that's it.
I will be shocked when it happens. I think down the road it may happen because of demographics.